Today, we're going to be talking to one of Canada's premier REITs. And man, they've done phenomenal over the last few years. And I'm excited about where they're going. So take a listen. Welcome back to Money Match. It's Ian Ardill here. We are joined today with Jason Jogia. He is their Chief Investment Officer. And Jason, great to have you on the show today.
Great to have you. Thank you.
Did I butcher your last name there?
No, you had it right.
Did I say it correctly?
You had it right. Yeah, you had it right.
Oh, so listen, I want to thank you so much. You normally look very, very professional, but you raced into the office today to do this interview because you're juggling a few things. You've had some personal changes at home. Tell me a little bit about what's going on at home.
Yeah, Ian, we just welcomed our fourth child, so a little baby at home. And given that it's so cold outside, I just ran out of the house, ran into the office in order to do this today, and then I'll get back to mama.
Oh, well, hey, thank you for sharing a little bit of your time with us. You know what? Under the circumstances of having a newborn, you look great.
Thank you. Thank you.
So for those of us who don't know the Avenue Living story, in a really kind of short snippet, who is Avenue? And then very quickly, just tell us the elevator pitch of what is the core trust.
Yeah, so Avenue Living is a owner operator of assets across North America, pretty broad footprint, and focused on really, three main essential pillars and what we call investing in the everyday. We're in the apartment business. That's how we were born back in 2006. We're in the self-storage business, and we're in the agricultural land business. Our Avenue Living Core Trust would be our flagship investment vehicle that is in the business of consolidating multifamily workforce housing assets across what I would consider low to moderate growth markets for us to be able to maximize operational efficiency and create alpha for our investors.
So, that's fascinating. I wonder, in terms of size, why wouldn't I just do this with my, building, down the street? How big are you guys?
Yeah, so Avenue Living as a group of companies just surpassed $4.3 billion in assets under management. And our flagship vehicle is just actually crossed over $3 billion in AUM. Put it in other numbers, we'd have over 14,000 apartments, individual apartments, or more than 30,000 people that live with us across Canada and the US. And I would also add to that we would have over 500 individual building structures, which would factually make us the second largest building owner in Canada.
Wow. And correct me if I'm wrong, Jason, you guys are the second largest private REIT in the country. Is that a fair statement in terms of economical size?
Absolutely. That would be a bang on statement.
Well, and that's why when I say premier, you guys have done a phenomenal job over the last number of years. We've been partnering with you since 2018. And since that time, we've seen some phenomenal growth trajectory even in that short season. So Jason, I'm just wondering if you might comment on some of the growth that we've seen over the last number of years. If we take aside from maybe some of the healthy real estate growth just recently in central Canada and in the Midwest, you've talked a little bit publicly about manufactured alpha. So for the basic investor, tell us a little bit about what is a manufactured alpha and what does that mean?
Yeah, so for us, when we think about real estate, there's in my opinion two components of return. There's the market drivers and then the operational drivers. And generally speaking, operators who have exposure to what I would consider higher growth markets tend to really benefit from market drivers because rising tides float all boats, and any operational effectiveness and efficiency tends to get muted when the markets are going up double digits every single year. We'll take Toronto or the greater Vancouver area as an example. And when you're operating in markets like Alberta or Saskatchewan or the middle of America, you tend to have a little bit more flatter growth curve. Just historically, doesn't matter what the cycles are, commodity cycles, great financial crisis, doesn't tend to have high highs or low lows. And as a result of that, operators within those environments really need to focus on the fundamentals of driving return for their investors through best in class operations. And at Avenue Living, how we do that in our, biggest customer centric focus is exactly that. We know who our customer is. We built a property management and an asset management business model to serve those customers. And as a result, by us being better than our peers, to be best in class in what we're delivering is service standard in the assets that typically are hiding in plain sight, meaning low density, medium density buildings. We've created a bit of a sustainable competitive advantage. And that has enabled us to, rise our returns above market and perform superior to the average. And so, I'll take an example. A market like Alberta over the last decade has had a consolidated annual growth rate of rental rates somewhere in the tune of about 1.4%. But Avenue Living as an entity, I'll take this year alone, our average rental rates are probably going up about 13 to 15%. So when you take those numbers, you recognize that if you're going to be able to be a better operator, you can sustain delivering better returns for your investor through better fundamentals of performance.
Awesome. And so what I'd highlight there, or what I think is kind of neat, is like from 2014 right through to 2020, there was a fairly slow or soft growth curve in the real estate market in Saskatchewan and Alberta, for example. I don't know if you would affirm that statement, but yet at the same time, as an investment vehicle, you guys were able to drive out value even in a soft real estate market. Is that a fair statement?
Absolutely, and I would add to that we've seen almost a 10-year protracted flat growth period for our economies that we play in, and that has not relied on market forces influencing that. And what's actually very interesting is that, you go back in that time, you had the great financial crisis, you had the commodity meltdown, you had the global pandemic, and now you're in this inflationary and high interest rate environment. Our return generation has continued to be consistent based on us being active management, active members in our business. And the lag in growth in the markets that we've targeted has actually created a massive disconnect in fundamentals. And so what I mean by that is, if you really think about Alberta or Saskatchewan, the average rental rates in these provinces are still below $1,500 for a 2-bedroom. And you contrast that to a GTA or some of the other secondary markets in Ontario, the disconnect is very, very wide. And so while we've focused on operations first, we're actually seeing some really nice emerging tailwinds in our business that is driving rents up even further than we had seen in yesteryear.
And one of the things that is also very attractive is the thing that we've kind of stated to begin with, is that first thing that you can see as growth is the actual assets themselves, the real estate growth. I believe the real estate growth potential in central Canada and into the Midwest is pretty strong when you think about the balancing effect of seeing what's going on in Toronto and Vancouver. There's a certainly strong growth opportunity in those marketplaces from a 10-year projections perspective. Is that a fair statement?
Yeah, absolutely. And I would say that it's fueled by some significant tailwinds, as mentioned, like, the government announcing 500,000 new people to Canada every year for the next 3 years. The fact that, Calgary, as an illustration, has some of the lowest supply of rental housing per capita of any other city in Canada right now. So when you look at these fundamentals, there's a massive demand driver and a lack of supply. And, economics 101 is going to tell you when there's so much supply and very little demand, buoyancy will happen. And we're hopefully about to see a decade of some really robust times for us.
Wonderful. Jason, so I'm wondering if I can flip gears into kind of two other subjects. One subject that I really want to talk about is how you guys have been thinking green. Different organizations have different phrasing to it. I'm wondering if you can think of, or kind of comment on some of the green initiatives that Avenue Living has been doing inside their core trust?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So Avenue Living is a pioneer in this space for the multifamily market. And what I mean by that is about, 2.5 years ago, we signed on as a signatory for the United Nations sponsored Principles of Responsible Investing. And for us, that was a big commitment that we made to work sustainability and ESG into our business platform. And, we tend to do things not just in paper, but in practice. And so at the time, we started to research sustainability initiatives in our building. I mean, as the second largest building owner in Canada, as a landlord who predominantly plays in low to medium density assets that are kind of wide, not high, we have tons of roof line. We've got tons of geographic footprint. What could we do to create environmental sustainability, to reduce GHG, to be able to GHG being greenhouse gas emissions, to be able to create impact in our portfolio? Not commonly known as the real estate industry as a whole, contributes to over 30% of the global greenhouse gas emissions. So Avenue partnered up with the Canadian Infrastructure Bank to essentially create a co-funded program where we invest and they invest, and we're going to do deep energy retrofits to our buildings. And what that means is that we'll take a building, 1980s, for example, 60 units, just as an illustration, and we'll go in and we'll invest in new cladding, new windows, new roofs, add solar to the rooftops, high efficiency boilers and mechanicals, LED lighting in case that asset doesn't have it already. And the result of that is a few interesting things. You've got a brand new building with essentially a 50-year useful life. You reduce your GHG emissions by a targeted 50% plus in reduction. So that's a massive impact. You reduce the consumption of utilities, which essentially becomes a cost savings. You reduce the required maintenance, CapEx, and R&M to that building based on the fact that, again, you've improved the useful life. And a result of that entire outcome is that this building retrofit pays for itself without touching rent. And so the investor benefits through better fundamentals of the assets, but the customer, which is a focal point of our business, benefits to a better place to live and not having to pay exorbitant rates to be able to live there. And so that is us doing our part. 2 years of work with the CIB, Canadian Infrastructure Bank, in R&D and negotiations. And I'm proud to say, finally, we have real pilot projects in play, and phase one of the project is actually going to launch next year. 6,000 of our units are already earmarked to go into the program. And the hope is that most of our units will cycle through this program over the next 4 years.
Wow. That's exciting. It's good business practice and good environmental practice, like a hand in glove. That's awesome. So can I just switch gears to talking about the economy in general? Yeah. The economy is definitely putting some pressure on people's borrowing rates, and we're seeing, the Canadian economy has never seen this fast of an interest rate hike ever. So I'm wondering if you might comment on how is Avenue Living dealing with rising interest rates? How is the loan to value of the assets going to be affected? And what are your thoughts about moving forward in the future economy?
Yeah, so inflation and interest rate inflation, or interest rate increases, have been upon us now for the better part of a year. And we saw it started with inflation last year, really starting to hit the pocket, and then interest rates starting in January this year. And what I found very interesting is, academically, you look at multifamily as an industry, and everybody would tell you that it holds up the best to inflation. But in practice, the question mark is, does it? And the answer is yes, it does, just to reveal the conclusion. And the reason I say that is that in real time, we were able to adapt our rents, adapt our operating expenditure, and ensure that we had a very active treasury management system, which we've had for years, to make sure that we were not caught flat-footed because cost of capital increased dramatically. And so, while the underlying bond yields have gone up more than 200 basis points this year, or the prime rate has gone up more than 300 basis points this year, Avenue Living has seen very, very, very little impact in its book. And it's actually allowed us to get out in front of it, where if we have known maturities coming up, where there's going to be an increase in interest rate, or the interest rate is projected to increase in the years to come, our asset plans have now revitalized the revenue goals and the operating income goals to ensure that we can hedge against that. What's interesting, and I look back at some of the recent purchases, this year alone, we bought over 2,000 doors. Our stress test is still higher when we bought those than the prevailing rates today. So my point is that coming at it with a disciplined approach, working in markets that have little to no rent control, responsibly increasing rents to ensure that you stay within the affordability construct for the residents, managing your expenses appropriately, investing in the assets as you need to with, interesting pioneering projects like CIB, has really set us light years ahead to navigate times of volatility like we're seeing today. And, it's interesting because you hear a lot of headwinds in the news and you hear about the macro environment. And, I look at it today and I say, well, it's just another Wednesday at Avenue Living. And it's just how we go to work every day.
Jason, thank you. Thank you for all you do. Because truly, I was thinking about this as you're talking here. You are creating a quadruple win, right? You're creating a win for your essentially your customers that are in your residence. They have sustainable, nice homes to live in. You're creating a win as an asset manager, and you're creating a win for the clients who are investing with you. And finally, you're creating a win for our society, trying to figure out how to be environmental and how to be sustainable. It's a privilege to work with you guys. So I know I just kind of just drove home a why, but I'll turn it over to you for the final word. Why Avenue? Why should people continue to trust you with their money? Why Avenue?
Yeah, I think there's a multitude of factors that I could go into, but if I synopsis it into a few places, we're pioneers in the industry, we're thought leaders in the industry. I mean, we literally spend a ton of our time and resource into trying to do it better for our customers, better for our employees, better for our end investors. At the end of the day, we're the custodians of a significant amount of capital, but it includes our own capital. As founders, as management, as our families are invested in this alongside, shoulder to shoulder with the investors. When I look at those different types of rationale, and then I look at the opportunity set of the macro environment, typically when things are going tough in high growth markets like we're seeing today in places like GTA or in New York or other markets, it's the secondary, more inland markets that are going to do a lot better. And, when I look at the disconnect in the fundamentals, the values of our assets here in Calgary to what you would be buying the same asset for in Montreal or buying it for in Toronto, there's a massive disconnect. And so we think that with the influx of migration, with the current political environment of how things are kind of flowing out with the economy, I think that Alberta, Saskatchewan, Middle America is going to see some really interesting, robust days. And the opportunity set in front of us is really exciting. So I encourage investors to take a deeper look at Avenue Living and understand that when you park your capital in here, you're alongside with the team here.
Jason, thank you, sir. And for more information, you can check out our show notes or check me out at ardillgroup.com. All the best. We'll see you next time.